Good evening, everyone. We'll be looking at the ZAT 2022 paper today, the verbal section. We start with this question. It's a grammar-based question. So as you can see, the instructions say which of the following sentences are grammatically correct. The first sentence says, have you any clothes to dispose of? Right? Now, this is correct. The subject-verb agreement is there. The prepositional usage is correct. Dispose of, yes, so that is correct. I saw a pleasant dream last night, right? So there is a mistake. So while we do say, probably when we speak, we do tend to use this, right? I saw, but we don't really see a dream, all right? The correct usage would be, I had a pleasant dream last night. Sentence 2 is definitely incorrect. I have done it many times safely, right? Now this is incorrect because when we say many yes, so many the article a is singular, right? After which we cannot use the plural form, yes, and the correct expression is many a time and not many a times. So sentence 3 is also incorrect. Okay, so now we have found two sentences that are incorrect, one that is correct. Now we are looking for an option, obviously, with 1 in it. Yes, so we have two options there. Okay, we have option 5 and option 2. So we know 2 and 3 are incorrect. That way we can choose our answer. Yes, we have we have option 2. 1, 5 and 6 are correct. Okay, so let's just see why sentence 4 is incorrect. Students struggle to cope up, it says. Okay. The meaning intended here is that they struggle to sort of deal with, yes, academic pressure. Okay, that is the meaning that we are looking at. So when that is so, we can just say students struggle to cope with academic pressure. We do not need to follow it up with an, or rather we do not need to follow it with an up. You need not give negative feedback to your employees is a correct sentence, and my friend is good at, right? So we say good or bad at something. We don't say good or bad in something. Okay, so that's why sentence 6 is also correct. Let's look at this. Yes, we have a poem here. Now this poem is about, it is about love, as you can see, right? So when you read the poem, you'll realize that it is about love. It is about how love happens. Yes, there's a description of that. So which of the following cannot be inferred from the poem? Yes, this is very, very important. Which of the following can be inferred, which of the following cannot be inferred, which of the following would the author agree with, disagree with? This question has to be read very, very carefully. Right. So here, the idea of love is different for the parties involved. Okay, so this is something that can be inferred from the poem because it says, I smiled at you because I thought you were someone else. You smiled back and there grew between two strangers in a library something that seems like love. But you loved me because you thought I was other than I was. Okay, and by we found that we had been mistaken all the while, etc., etc. Right, so the idea of love is different for the parties involved. So that is something that can be inferred. Love may start with small acts like glancing and smiling. We get from the last line. We make mistakes in love. This, of course, because the last but one line says that we found we had been mistaken all the while, right? So that is something that can be inferred from this poem. We don't fall in love with others, but with ourselves. Okay, so here it says, I smiled at you because I thought you were someone else. Yes, and there grew between two strangers in a library something that seems like love, but you loved me because you thought. So there's nothing in this poem that conveys the idea that we're falling in love with ourselves. All right, so that's the reason is the answer. Yes, this cannot be inferred. And we fall in love with strangers is very clearly stated in the third line, between two strangers in a library. Yes, so that is something that can definitely be inferred, right? So in this case, yes, love grew between two strangers in a library, which means we can fall in love with strangers. We have here a short passage and there are blanks in it. We have to choose the best option to fill in the blanks. So which of the following options will best fill up the above blanks meaningfully? Let's take a look at the clues we have. The moment we no longer have a free press, anything can happen. What makes it dash for a totalitarian? Okay, so totalitarian is a dictatorship. So it says that here also, or any other dictatorship. Okay, to rule is that dash are not informed. Okay, how can you have an opinion if you are not informed? If everybody always lies to you, the dash is not that you believe, okay, you believe the lies, but rather that nobody believes anything any longer. Okay, so that's your clue. This is because lies by their very nature have to be changed. Okay, lies by their very nature, the nature of a lie itself is that they have to be changed, and a lying government has dashed to rewrite its own history. Okay, so these are the clues we have here. Now, what could fit into the blanks? What makes it possible for a totalitarian or any other dictatorship is to rule? Okay, what makes it possible for a dictatorship to rule is that people are not informed. How can you have an opinion if you are not informed, right? So the you conveys the idea that we are definitely talking about the people. Okay, so that can fit in. If everybody always lies to you, the consequence is not that you believe the lies, but rather that nobody believes anything any longer. Okay, this is because lies by their very nature have to be changed, and a lying government has constantly to rewrite its own history, right? So it says lies by their very nature have to be changed. Yes, and it also says, so in that case, constantly is a good fit for the last blank. All right, so option 1 is the answer. Yes, but let's check the other options. Okay, what do we have now? What makes it absurd for a totalitarian or any other dictatorship to rule is that subjects are not informed. Now, subjects is a rather heavy word for this particular sentence, because the word subjects to refer to people is generally used when we're talking kingdom, not when we are talking about a totalitarian, a dictatorship. There it'll still be the citizens or the people. Yes, so that is one reason. And the last option, the word for the last blank in option 2 says no reason. A lying government has no reason to rewrite its own history. Well, the sentence tells us that lies by their very own nature have to be changed. So in that case, a lying government would have every reason to rewrite, because it has to keep on telling lies. Yes, so no reason will not fit in. Then what makes it unique for a dictatorship to rule is that senators, yes, senators are the parliamentarians, the people who, the people who are elected. Yes, so it is generally a term specific to the US, right? The Senate, belonging to the Senate. Okay, so that definitely doesn't fit in here. It's not the Senate that are not informed. Okay, so option 2 can be eliminated. What makes it necessary for a totalitarian or any other dictatorship to rule is that citizens are not informed. Citizens might fit into the second blank. Okay, and then it says the joy is not that you believe the lies. So this word definitely doesn't fit into the third blank, so we can eliminate it. And what makes it unpleasant for a totalitarian or any other dictatorship to rule is that plebeians are commoners. So while that might still fit into the second blank, yes, it's not unpleasant for a totalitarian government to rule if the commoners are not informed. So there's a contradiction there. Yes, therefore we can eliminate 5 also. Right? So 1 is the best choice. Yes, so we have here a short passage, and the question says, which of the following statements can best be concluded? So we have a critical reasoning type of question here. So which one can be concluded from the passage? So what information do we have? Geologists have been investigating a potential cycle, yes, in geological events for a long time. Then it goes on to say that scientists had suggested that the geological record had a 30 million year cycle. Okay, so I'm just pointing out relevant words, key phrases, yes, in the passage. While in the 1980s and 90s, researchers used the best dated geological events at the time to give them a range of the length between pulses. Okay, so between pulses of 26.2 to 30.6 billion years. Now everything seems to be in order. Okay, and the last sentence says, a study late last year suggested that this 27.5 million year mark is when mass extinctions happen too. Okay, so going by the information that is provided, yes. So if you look at the first option, it says not all species go extinct once every 27.5 million years. This very clearly contradicts the last sentence of the passage. Yes, so it is not option 1. Pulse between geological events is constant. Yes, so this also, the third line contradicts it, the third line of the passage. Therefore, we eliminate option 2. All species go extinct once every 27.5 million years. See, it talks about mass extinctions. Yes, mass extinctions would imply that there's extinction on a large scale, but whether it is all species, it could be one species also, we don't know. Yes, so we don't have enough information basically. Therefore, option 3 is out. Option 4 says geological disasters. Yes, now it does talk about mass extinctions. It talks about a 30 million year cycle. It talks about pulses, but it doesn't mention the word or even imply the word disaster. Yes, therefore, option 4 also can be eliminated. The last option is the answer. Mass extinctions and geological pulse are correlated. Right, because that's basically what it tells us. It tells us there is a cycle. It then goes on to tell us that there is a range of the length between pulses. Now everything seems to be in order, right? Suggests that the 27.5 million mark is when mass extinctions happen. Two. Please note the word two. Right, so that tells us that the two things are correlated. We have again a short passage with blanks in it, so we have to fill in the blanks. Yes, which of the following options will best fill up the above blanks meaningfully? When I ask people to name 3 recently implemented technologies that most impact our world, world today, they usually propose the computers, internet, and the laser. All 3 were unplanned. Okay, dash and dash upon their discovery and remained dash well after their initial use. Okay, so actually the clue here has to come from the last sentence itself, right? The first sentence doesn't give us much of a clue other than telling us, of course, the subject of the sentence, which is, 3 recently implemented technologies that most impact our world today. Okay, so what do we get? Option 1 says all 3 were unplanned. Okay, so if it is unplanned, comma, yes, then it is a word that has to go along with, it has to convey something similar to unplanned. Okay, it need not be the exact same thing, but yes, it has to be similar to that. Okay, so we have unpredicted. So unplanned, unpredicted, nobody really foresaw. Yes, that's the idea. So that could fit in. Amazing. Yes, which could fit in as such. Surprising, which again could fit in. Astonishing is something that I would actually eliminate, because astonishing does convey the idea that it not negative specifically. Astonishing is surprising, yes, but if I had to choose between astonishing and surprising, then I would probably choose surprising, because astonishing does convey the idea that, it leaves us with a little bit of shock, maybe. Yes. So, but don't choose your option based only on one word, right? We look at the other words. Yes. Unplanned, unappreciated, okay, upon their discovery. So, unplanned, unpredicted, and unappreciated upon their discovery, and remained unappreciated well after their initial use. Okay, so whatever word fits into the third blank has to definitely sort of either repeat the same idea as the second blank, or give a close synonym. Yes, that's the idea, because it remained something. Okay, so that way option 1 works well. Yes, and that is the answer also, but we'll check the others. Remain shocking. Okay, so they were unplanned, amazing, and shocking upon their discovery, and remain shocking after their initial use. While amazing might fit into the second blank, shocking, right, upon their discovery, and remain shocking also, there's a contradiction between amazing and shocking, because amazing definitely conveys a positive idea, shocking does convey a slightly negative idea. All right, so option 2 can be eliminated. Surprising, fulfilling upon their discovery, and remained unfulfilling. So there you would have a direct contradiction. So option 3 is out. astonishing. Okay, all three were unplanned, astonishing, and amazing upon their discovery, and remained amazing well after their initial use. Okay, so here you have again, while amazing and amazing might fit into the second and the third blanks, astonishing, right? So they were unplanned, astonishing. Okay, as I said, slightly negative idea, and then you're suddenly switching to amazing. Yes, so that's why option 4 doesn't work. Astonishing in the first blank, unplanned, astonishing, and superb upon their discovery, and remained superb. So it is way too similar. It's also difficult to choose between 4 and 5 because they more or less convey a similar tone, right? Because you have astonishing, which might give a slightly negative idea, and then a very positive word in option 5, amazing, also positive. Yes, therefore we can eliminate it. Option 1 works very well because unpredicted and unplanned are similar to each other. Unappreciated and remained unappreciated works well. Here we have a grammar based question again, the incorrect use of preposition. Manager was sitting at the desk is right, because when we work, we sit at the desk, right? Sitting on the desk would literally mean sitting on top of it. Yes, so that's correct. My work is superior to yours. Superior, inferior, junior, senior are all followed by to. I prefer coffee than tea. So this is wrong. Yes, because prefer is followed by to. Yes, there is a tendency to use over after prefer these days, but that is also incorrect actually. The word to be followed, the correct preposition or the appropriate preposition after the word prefer is to, right? I prefer some X to Y. Okay. She was accused for. We don't accuse someone for something, we accuse someone of something. This is an exception to the rule. That's correct, because something is an exception to something. They are leaving to England soon is incorrect. It should be they're leaving for England, right? They're heading to is the idea. So heading might be followed by to, but leaving, especially the idea is if they are leaving one place and heading to another place, okay, the correct preposition after leave will be for. Okay, so option 3, yes, is the answer. We have here a parajumbles or an ordering of sentences kind of question. So let's see what we get. But when it comes to companies that lack computer programmers, the government is far more sympathetic. So this implies that this is following something. As a result, limited access to foreign talent is a common gripe, right? As a result. So it is as a result. So that doesn't work. And demand for the latter has soared among the British startups. So we again have an and there. This is less inconsistent, referring to something else. An HGV driver takes between 6 and 10 weeks to train, a competent coder several years. Now, this looks like a good starting sentence, yes, but well, for one, we don't have any option starting with 5. Yes, so we revisit. All right. So since 2 has as a result, 3 has and 4 has this, which refers to something that is mentioned. So here actually you do get this. This is less inconsistent than it may seem. This is a reference to what is mentioned in sentence 1, that the government is far more sympathetic when it comes to companies that lack computer programmers. Okay, so that's why the starting sentence is 1. Okay, so the government is far more sympathetic. This is less inconsistent than it may seem. So 1, 4. Okay, so we get our answer also, which is option 2. Okay, what is it followed by? 5. An HGV driver takes between 6 and 10 weeks to train, a competent coder several years. Okay, followed by sentence 3, and demand for the latter. Latter would be a competent coder. So that is the connection between 5 and 3. Okay, and then of course, as a result, yes, so that is the last sentence. We have yet another ordering of sentences or parajumbles. So it's sentence 1 says, in America, primary age pupils. Okay, so that could be a starting sentence, are on average 5 months behind where they would be, etc., etc. As a new school year gets underway in many countries, the harm caused by months of closure is becoming ever clearer. Yes, so this is also a good starting sentence because it says as a new school year gets underway in many countries, right? And it introduces the idea the harm caused by months of closure. Okay, the crisis will accelerate that trend. That trend has to be a reference to something else. Okay, the damage is almost certainly worse in places such as India and Mexico, where the disruption to schooling has been greater. The damage, meaning the damage has been mentioned before. Okay, right. And even before the pandemic, parents around the world were growing more willing to pay for extra lessons in the hope of boosting their children's education. Okay, so we start the sequence with sentence 2. Okay, as it gets here, the harm caused by months of closure. This is followed by 1, which says what exactly the harm is, which is primary age pupils are on an average 5 months behind where they would usually be in maths and 4 months in reading. Okay, so starting with 2 followed by 1. All right, so your answer is option 1. Okay, followed by 4, which says the damage is almost certainly worse. Yes, even before the pandemic, they were growing more willing to pay for extra. And then you have sentence 3, which says the crisis will accelerate that trend, which is a reference to parents being more willing to pay for extra lessons. Yes, so option 1 is your answer. We have here another critical reasoning based question, which says, so the question is, which of the following can be best concluded from the passage? Yes, so this passage talks about something called the Swiss cheese model. Swiss cheese is a slab, generally it's a kind of cheese where a slab of cheese has randomly distributed holes. Okay, so one theory of accidents. Yes, so it is called the Swiss cheese model. Basically, what it says is that if several slabs of cheese are stacked together, nothing can slip through it because the holes are randomly distributed, right? So if even one slab doesn't align, the impending catastrophe will meet a layer of resistance and the worst is averted. Okay, aviation professionals. So remember, it started with accidents. It's a theory of accidents, comparing it to a Swiss cheese slab. Yes, so aviation professionals will tell you that the plane crashes never happen for a single reason. There may be an identifiable primary factor, but it's usually a chain of events, an array of circumstances neatly piling up. Okay, so averting catastrophe is actually easier than it seems, says option 1. It's a general statement, right? Averting catastrophe is actually easier. It's talking about averting catastrophe, meaning avoiding it. Yes, or not just avoiding it, heading it off and making sure it doesn't happen, right? So this is a generalized statement, but not to be concluded from this passage. Any historically relevant event is an accident because it involves a chain of preceding events. Yes, so here it's talking about a historically relevant event, which is not something we can conclude from this passage. Accidents cannot be averted since a chain of events have to be averted to avert accidents. This is a very definitive statement, not to be concluded from this passage. A catastrophe can be averted if the preceding array of events meets resistance. So this is the correct answer because it lines up, it has the keywords from the passage and it conveys the idea from the passage. Any disaster is a culmination, right? Meaning it ends, right? So of many events happening in a particular order. Again, it says nothing about a particular order. Yes, also to say any disaster is a culmination, right, does seem like a slightly generalized statement. Yes, but option 4 is definitely the best of the lot because it talks about, yes, the passage also talks about meeting a layer of resistance and therefore the preceding array of events. This passage is about stupidity. Yeah, the first paragraph introduces the idea of stupidity. It defines it as a very specific cognitive failing. Okay, the second paragraph talks about stupidity. It explains or describes it further and also gives an example, the example of Field Marshal Douglas Haig. Yes, and the third paragraph talks about the connection, or let's say sort of differentiates between, not differentiates, it talks about the connection between stupidity and intelligence. Yes, there is a connection according to the passage. Yes, the question says which of the following best summarizes the author's view on stupidity? Now, the answer to this question is option 3, which is pushing our extent is existent, okay, solution to fix an alien problem. Alien in this case is strange, yes, problem is stupidity, okay. Now, where do we get this answer from? We get this from the third paragraph, first line, yes, which says stupidity will often arise in cases like this when an outdated conceptual framework is forced into service, mangling is, completely messing up the user's grip on some new phenomenon. Okay, so we have an existing solution, yes, so it's an outdated conceptual framework. So we have a certain solution and we are trying to force it into service, meaning we're trying to use it to fix a problem which is new, right? So we completely mess up the person who's trying to use it, right? Who's trying to fix the problem. It messes up the person's grip on the new phenomenon. Yes, so that's where we get the answer from. The others, comprehending a problem by applying a existing worldview is stupidity, right? So comprehending a problem, it's not about comprehending, it's about finding a solution. Yes, the inability to avoid forcing our current views. Yes, so there's always some word in or phrase in every option that helps us eliminate it, but in this case we find the answer from the third paragraph. Which of the following statements best explains why stupidity for a smart person is perfectly compatible with intelligence? Okay, so this we get from the last sentence. So basically this is the last sentence, yes, that has been quoted in the question. Okay, so the example of Hague has been referred to in the last sentence also. As I said, the example of Hague is given in the second paragraph, right, where it talks about how Hague tends to sort of, he talks about it, the author calls it a conceptual obsolescence. Okay, obsolescence is again being outdated. Yes, so a failure to update their cognitive tools. Yes, cognitive is a reference to our intellect. Yes, so a failure to update their cognitive tools to fit the task in hand. Yes, in at least some cases, intelligence actively abets is help stupidity by allowing pernicious rationalization. Yes, so it is from these lines that we get the answer to question 11, which says, yes, past successes make us believe that we are intelligent and capable of explaining any new phenomenon. Yes, so option 3 is our answer to this one. Yes, again here intelligence is poorly defined. Yes, it's nothing about the definition of intelligence. A new phenomenon creates fear. Again, nothing to do with fear. Yes, so we don't have definition. We're not talking about, this is not talking about fear. Intelligent people are scared to admit their lack of knowledge. Again, extreme, yes, going beyond the scope. And intelligence, probably option 5 is one we look at, but it is not intelligence when perceived through past successes makes any, see again, this is an example of a trap option because the word rationalization is mentioned in the second paragraph. Yes, but it says many rationalization of a new phenomenon acceptable. It is not about whether it is acceptable or not. It is more that, intelligence, he says, in certain cases helps stupidity along by allowing the person to rationalize it, basically make it sound logical or seem logical. Yes, so option 3 is better, which says it makes past successes make us believe we are intelligent and capable of explaining new phenomena. Right. We have another question based on this passage. Which of the following can best help a leader? Yes. So Hague, Field Marshal Douglas Hague is a leader. Yes. So the example that is given can best help a leader avoid stupidity. Okay. So what helps us avoid stupidity? We get this again from the last but one line of the second paragraph, which says, unsurprisingly, this did not serve them well in formulating a strategy. They were hampered. Hampered is they were held back beyond the shortage of material resources by a kind of conceptual obsolescence, a failure to update their cognitive tools to fit the task in hand. Yes. So the idea is, so what would help a leader avoid stupidity? Being aware that, yes, so the answer is option 2. Being aware that our current answers are only applicable to the current context. Yes, otherwise our tools are outdated. We need to fit them according to the new situation or the new problem. Yes, so that's the answer. We have here a very short passage. Yes, and the question, again, a critical reasoning question: which of the following statements cannot be concluded? The overwhelming preponderance. Yes, preponderance is not just existence but also the fact that it dominates. Yes, so the overwhelming, to a large extent, yes, preponderance of people have not freely decided what to believe, but rather have been socially conditioned. Look at the word indoctrinated. Yes, a doctrine is a principle or an ideal. So to indoctrinate someone is to push those ideals or set those ideals or principles very firmly in a person's mind. Yes, so they have been socially conditioned into their beliefs. Yes, so they have not decided by themselves, rather they have been conditioned into their beliefs. They are unreflective thinkers. To reflect is to think. So they don't think deeply, they are conditioned into believing something. Yes, so we are looking for one statement which cannot be concluded from the excerpt. A normal thinker finds it difficult to recognize what is happening to them. A normal thinker. Yes, so please note that the passage is talking about the overwhelming preponderance of people, meaning the large majority, to simplify it in this case. Yes, so option 1 can be eliminated. Beliefs that appear normal and natural heighten their acceptance. Yes, so if it is something that the majority accepts, believes, then it is accepted by other people too. A lot of people end up believing what they passionately oppose. Yes, so this is our answer. This is something that cannot be concluded from this because it is talking about people being conditioned into believing something. Yes, and 4 says things that we do automatically need to be reflected upon. The author is saying they are unreflective thinkers. Yes, so that tells us that he believes that they should be reflected upon, and the inability to criticize one's belief leads to indoctrination. Yes, so if we do not think about it deeply, yes, and therefore we cannot criticize, then we tend to sort of accept. So option 3 is our answer. We have here a reading comprehension passage again. This passage actually is quite amusing. Yes, it talks about bullshitting versus lying. Yes, so it sort of differentiates between bullshitting and lying. All right. The first question is rather generalized because it just tells us which of the following can be best inferred from the passage. It doesn't generalize. By generalized, I just mean that we cannot identify one specific part of the passage, from which we can get the answer from the question. Yes, the question doesn't give us a clue. Okay. So the answer to this question is option 2, which says both the liar and the bullshitter intend to deceive. Yes, in their own ways. Yes, so each one intends to deceive. It is just that it is in his or her own way. Okay, so this we get from the second, third, and the fourth lines. Since bullshit need not be false, it differs from lies in its misrepresentational intent. Yes, so this sentence tells us it differs from lies. So it goes on to tell us the bullshitter may not deceive us or even intend to do so. Okay, or even intend to do so, either about facts or about what he takes the facts to be. What he does necessarily attempt to deceive us about is his enterprise. Okay, so the difference is the misrepresentational intent, but both of them intend to deceive in one way or the other. Yes, so this is where you get the answer from. This question says, why does the author say that the bullshitter's intention is neither to report the truth nor to conceal it? All right. So this is somewhere here in the 10th line or so. What we are not to understand, okay, is that his intention is neither to report the truth nor to conceal it. Okay. So if you read it from the beginning of that sentence, this is of course part of the sentence. The fact about himself that the bullshitter hides, on the other hand, is that the truth values of his statements are of no central interest to him. Yes. So basically, the truth is of no interest to the bullshitter, right? What we are not to understand is that his intention is neither to report the truth, he doesn't want to tell the truth, report the truth, nor does he want to hide it, conceal it. Yes. So the fact is that it is of no interest to him. Yes. So that would be option 4. Yeah. They do not find, bullshitters do not find the truth useful. That's what the author means when he says that the intention is neither to report the truth nor to conceal it. It is of no use to a bullshitter. When will a liar best turn into a bullshitter? Okay. So a liar, so the author has already differentiated, saying that it is the misrepresentational intent. That means both of them intend to cheat, deceive, but in different ways. Okay, or rather for different reasons, not different ways, for different reasons. Yes. So when will a liar best turn into a bullshitter? We get this from the 7th line or so. Yes, which says, your answer here is option 3. When a liar focuses only on the outcome and not on telling lies. But the fact about himself that the liar hides is that he is attempting to lead us from away from a correct apprehension of reality. We are not to know that he wants us to believe something he supposes to be false. Okay, so the idea is he does not focus on the outcome, he also focuses on the lies. Yes, so that's why when does a liar turn into a bullshitter? When he focuses only on the outcome. A bullshitter, on the other hand, is focused on the outcome. Yes, so he is not focused on the telling of lies. Yes, so option 3 is the answer to this one. We have another reading comprehension passage. This passage talks about a good life. Yes, it describes a good life. Yes, it also introduces 2 terms, hedonic and eudaimonic, which we get from the first paragraph, right? He introduces hedonism. Hedonism is a certain principle, a certain philosophy which says the pursuit of materialistic pleasures is important, necessary. Yes. And the other idea that the author introduces, eudaimonic, which says that it is, a sense of, or a good life comes with a sense of purpose and fulfillment one gets by contributing to the greater good. Okay. So the first paragraph describes a good life from these 2 perspectives. The second paragraph talks about a psychologically rich life. Yes, so it starts out with a question, what is a psychologically rich life, and proceeds to explain or describe it. And the first sentence of the last paragraph, it says, crucially, an experience doesn't have to be fun in order to qualify as psychologically enriching, right? So it is continuing the idea of a psychologically rich life and talks about how even a bad event can actually lead to something good. Yes. So the first question asks us the contrast. Yes. Which statement contrasts hedonic from eudaimonic? The answer to this question is option 2, which says, hedonic focuses on what gives pleasure to self, while eudaimonic focuses on what he or she believes benefits the society. So we already read that from the first paragraph. Yes. So we find it here. All right. According to Aristotelian theory, the first kind of life would be classified as hedonic, one based on pleasure, comfort, stability, and strong social relationships. The second one is eudaimonic, primarily concerned with a sense of purpose and fulfillment one gets by contributing to the greater good. Yes, so that is the difference between hedonic and eudaimonic. Which of the following statements best defines a psychologically rich life? So this is actually based on the second paragraph, right? We get it from the 3rd line. Yes. Second and third lines. It is one, right? So what's a psychologically rich life? One characterized by interesting experiences in which novelty and or complexity are accompanied by profound, deep changes in perspective. Perspective is nothing but point of view. All right. So this directly leads us to option 5, which says a life where novel experiences result in a fundamental change to our existing views. Right, so novel or complex, remember that's what it says. Yes, result in a fundamental, profound change, fundamental change to our existing views. Yes, so that is our answer. Which of the following statements can be best concluded from the passage? Yes, the answer to this one is option 3. We get this answer from the third paragraph. As I said, the third paragraph continues the idea of a psychologically rich life by talking about how even a negative event or a hardship can actually enable or lead us to a good life. Yes, so it says an event or an experience doesn't have to be fun. Yes, in order to qualify as this as psychologically enriching, it might even be a hardship. Living through war or a natural disaster might make it hard to feel as though you're living a particularly happy or purposeful life. But okay, so there's a contradictory idea there. You can still come out of the experience with psychological richness. Yes, or you might encounter, etc., etc. So an unpleasant experience can enable a good life. Yes, so it doesn't say that a psychologically rich life is a good life. It's not an inference, it is something that is directly stated. A bad experience can enrich someone, not psychologically. That is a twisting of what is mentioned in the passage. Yes, that's why option 2 is not your answer. And a good life should not be seen in binary terms, stretching the passage, going beyond the scope. And life need not be good but can still be psychologically rich is again a twisting of what is stated in the passage. Yes, so it is the author specifically talks about war, living through war or a natural disaster, which is an unpleasant experience which can enable a good life. Yes, so option 3 is the answer. We have another passage here, a short one, discusses Arendt's views, right, on something called publicness. Yes, so the second sentence, you could say, is sort of a summary of what the passage, the first paragraph is about. She draws a distinction between what it means to act. Yes, act here is not acting, but taking action, yes, socially, and what it means to act politically. Okay, so this particular paragraph talks about conformism. Yes, how people feel the need to conform. That means go along with what people around them are doing. Yes, so this paragraph talks about that. All right, and the second paragraph, yes, says the healthy public life, right? So Arendt wants to drive home the point that healthy public life requires that we do not just see ourselves, okay, we do not just see ourselves as social actors, yes, but also as fully public persons, committing to judging and acting as members of a common world we want to inhabit and pass on, right? So the second paragraph actually defines what a public action is. Yes, so it is an action in which we stand out, are individuated, meaning we are the ones, each person is taking that action, become in some way excellent in a manner, okay, that is of service to others and a greater good. All right, so which the question says, according to the passage, who can best be categorized as a public person? Yes, so what was the description that was given? Public action is an action in which we stand out, are individuated, become in some way excellent in a manner. Yes, so this is where we are getting the description. And a greater good. So basically, it is of service. Whatever action we take is of service to others and a greater good. Yes, an NGO employee who was tasked to lead a campaign against tribal land acquisition. Yes, the minute we say who was tasked, yes, meaning the person was given the job, given the responsibility. He or she didn't take it up himself. Yes, therefore option 1 is out. A wildlife photographer who highlighted the plight of poverty-stricken migrants. Yes, so it's a wildlife photographer. His profession is something else, but he highlights the campaign of poverty-stricken migrants by posting their pictures. So this is a public action meant to do good for someone else. Yes, it is individuated and it is something which provides a service to someone else. Yes, so that's the answer. Option 3 talks about an online fraud victim. A victim is a person who suffered and therefore takes action. So it is not for public good. Yes, a parent who organized protests against the random fee hike. Yes, obviously a parent who's protesting a fee hike is doing it for himself or herself, right? Not for the greater good. A local politician who filed RTI applications to unearth financial scams by a village panchayat would again suggest some sort of ulterior motive, right? So none of these fit into the definition. It is only option 2. Based on the passage, which of the following options best describes public action? Okay, so here the answer to this, yes, acting for a just cause regardless of what society thinks about it. So this we get from the second paragraph, fourth and fifth line. Yes, so this is the description, okay, of the public action. We know what a public action is. All right. We also add to this what is stated in the first paragraph, which talks about conformism. Yes. So acting for a just cause, all right, regardless of what society thinks about it. Yes. So this we can also get from here. This is the space where we take risks. Okay. Subject our common life to scrutiny, seek justice, all right, in order to be increasingly open to the claims and new needs of other humans, ones who are not our household and our kin. Okay, so we're taking some risk, we are doing something, we are acting regardless of what society thinks. So we do not worry about conformism. Yes, so we do not worry about conformism here, and we take whatever action is for a just cause, yes, that we think is necessary. Okay, which of the following is the best reason for focusing on behavior instead of acting in public? Okay, so when should we focus on behavior instead of acting, taking action in public? Yes, now this we get from the first paragraph, yes, which says, yes, so as I told you, right, it introduces, so Arendt draws a distinction between what it means to act socially and what it means to act politically. Okay, one of the things she fears about modern societies is that society becomes the realm of conformism. Conformism, as I said, going along with everyone just for the sake of it. Okay, so if you look at the last 2-3 sentences, it says we lose ourselves, okay, in the task of managing behavior and forget that our true public task is to act and to distinguish ourselves, meaning to set ourselves apart by taking action. Yes, the risk is therefore that we confuse behavior with action, and that in modern liberal societies, behavior replaces action as the foremost mode of human relationship. This is where we get our answer from. Okay, so the answer to this question is option 1. So what is the best reason for focusing on behavior instead of acting in public? When we are dependent on each other, right? Leading us to focus on what is accepted by others. We are only worried about conforming to what everybody else thinks or does. Yes, that's when we focus only on behaving, not on actually taking action that is necessary for a just cause. We have another short poem. So there are actually 2 poem-based questions in this. I'll go directly to the question because it is a question based on the theme, yes, which reflects the theme of the poem. Generally, the first 1 or 2 lines, the last 1 or 2 lines of a passage poem does lead us to the theme. Yes, so it hurts to walk on new legs, the curse of consonants, the wobble of vowels. Okay, now if we focus too much on the consonants and vowels, we may get misguided here, misdirected here. All right, focus instead on the word, the curse, the wobble, which indicates that there is something that is not completely positive. Okay, and it goes on to say, and you for whom I gave up a kingdom, okay, can never love that thing I was. Okay, when you look into my past, you see only weeds and scales. Again, negative. Once I had a voice, now I have legs. Sometimes I wonder, was it a fair trade? Right, so it ends on a note, where the author is reflecting, right, where the poet is reflecting, yes, and maybe not on a very positive note again. Yes, so it's not harshly negative, but yes, does convey the idea of something negative. The answer to this is actually option 2. Yes, our quest for love. Yes, quest is nothing but search. Our quest for love is accompanied with pain. Yes, because the last sentence, the last line does say, sometimes I wonder, was it a fair trade? Because when you look into my past, you see only weeds and scales, meaning you do not see something positive, right? That is the idea. So our concern for loss is more than what we gain is beyond the scope of this particular poem, right? So it's not the concern for loss. Our loss of identity is irreparable. Irreparable means it cannot be repaired, it cannot be put back together. So, this is quite extreme based on this option. That's why I said we also have to look at the degree of positive or negative. Yes, so it is not that negative. As the future, because he or she does say, sometimes I wonder, right? As the future unfolds, our distant past looks pleasant, right? So this again is irrelevant. And nostalgic recollection undermines as weakens materialistic gains, completely beyond the scope of this particular poem. Yes, so option 2 is the best choice. We have one more question based on the same poem. Once I had a voice, now I have legs. What does the author best mean by this? All right. Now, the answer to this is option 1. The poet is contemplative of his or her identity, right? So once I had a voice, now I have legs, does seem to indicate facets, aspects of the person's character or identity, right? So that is the best answer. The poet has lost his or her speech. Yes, this is a little too literal. Just because it says once I had a voice, now I have legs doesn't literally mean that the person has lost his or her speech. The poet puts less value on the new world beyond the scope of this. The poet's actions speak louder. Actions speak louder. Yes. So this is again meant to be a slightly misleading option. And the poet is indecisive. Nothing about being indecisive. We have here a grammar-based question. Which of the following conditional sentences? Yes. So conditional sentences, there are 3 types. You have the real conditional, the unreal conditional, and the past conditional. What we need to remember is that there is a fixed structure for each of these sentences. Yes. So which ones are grammatically incorrect? If Sandhya had started from the hotel on time, she would not have missed the flight. Yes, so the sentence is correct because you have had started the past perfect in the conditional clause, would plus present perfect in the main clause. So this is correct. The students wouldn't have completed their assignment even if the professor would have been there. Yes, so this is incorrect because we do not put a would in the conditional clause. We put it in the main clause. Yes, so sentence 2 is incorrect. I had traveled across Europe if I weren't afraid. Yes, so if you are starting with had traveled, which is the past perfect in the main clause, the conditional clause should be similar to sentence 1. It should have been if I hadn't been afraid. This should have had the past perfect tense. Saurav won't join music classes unless his father will ask him. So if you have won't is will not, which is the future tense in the main clause. So unless is another way of conveying a conditional clause. So the conditional clause should have the simple present tense. So this should have been unless his father asks him. Okay. So this should have been had been there. Okay. So here it is. If I weren't afraid, if I hadn't been afraid. So 2 is wrong, 3 is wrong, 4 is wrong. Yes. Should you wish to join the party? So this is another way of conveying a condition. If you wish to join the party, should you wish to join the party, you must let me know by this evening, right? So this again is correct, right? So should you wish, if you wish, you must let me know. Okay, so that is also correct. We would be stupid if we shared our strategy. Yes, so if the conditional clause has the simple past, the main clause will have would plus be. Yes, so this is also correct. So the answer to this will be option 3. Sentences 2, 3 and 4 are incorrect. We have another short passage, a critical reasoning question. Which of the following can best be concluded? This passage talks about, or rather differentiates between labor and work. All right. So actually, if you look at the first sentences of both the paragraphs, laboring is simply what we do to survive. Work, on the other hand, gives collective meaning to what we do. Okay, so that is the difference, yes, and that is what option 1 says. Labor enables us to survive while work makes survival meaningful. Okay, doing what is asked of a role is labor while going beyond the role is work. Actually, if you read the first sentence of both the paragraphs, you directly get option 1. Right? None of the other options fit in. Unacknowledged work, there's nothing about unacknowledged or acknowledged. To be healthy needs labor. Yes. Terrace gardening is labor. That's an example. Yes. So there are examples given in this case also. But as I said, the first sentence of each paragraph sums it up.